Hello, and welcome to the Resilient Leader's Journey, a podcast where we navigate the challenging currents of growth and change. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce to you Penny Tremblay in studio with me, a workplace relationships expert, Harvard-trained mediator, and creator of the Sandbox system, a practical framework that helps leaders turn conflict into stronger collaboration at work. And through her workplace restoration and conflict management training, Penny shows managers how to handle tough conversations, balance accountability with empathy, and reduce the hidden costs of unresolved conflict. She's also the author of Sandbox Strategies for the New Workplace, Conflict Resolution from the Inside Out. I can't wait for you to hear how her playful yet deeply practical approach can help you and your team thrive in the face of challenge. Penny Tremblay, how are you today?
Thank you for having me here. Thank you so much.
So glad to have you. The pressing question I have, the cover of your book has all these sandcastles. Where's your favorite place to go build a sandcastle?
In the sandbox.
I was thinking like in Siesta Key or something like that, but we'll say in the sandbox. So, Penny, maybe you can help explain to people a little bit about what conflict resolution is, restoration is, and what the sandbox system is.
Oh, sure. Well, workplace conflict is something that is prevalent in many, many workplaces. It's a $700 billion price to corporate North America. And what I do is I help teams work through conflict. When there is conflict, people call me up to help them resolve it because they don't know how. Not all HR managers know how or have the capacity, the time, the ability to do this, or not all companies even have an HR manager. So I do mediation or workplace restoration, which is like an entire mediation or a mediation for an entire department.
Okay, so I can't imagine any companies that have conflict. You sound to me like I'm wrong.
Well, that's because you live in Rhode Island, which is such a happy and friendly state, because I never seem to run into any disgruntled people when I'm here either.
So what are some of the reasons that a workplace would develop conflict? Because it sounds to me it's not talking about one person with a conflict. I think you described to me it's an environment that has the conflict.
It's a department, or it's toxicity, or it's change, transition. It's this era. So, for example, one of the most common things that causes conflict in work teams is avoidance.
And what does that mean?
Not dealing with conflict with the right person when it comes up. So rather than going directly to my colleague I have conflict with, I will go to my manager and expect them to deal with it for me. Manager just avoids it, thinking that magically people are going to wake up tomorrow or next month not feeling as horrible about each other as they are today, which is avoiding, and that never happens.
So that sounds a lot like the old ostrich putting their head in the
That's
sand.
right. I didn't mean to say it never happens. I mean, it never resolves itself.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It just keeps getting worse. So the ostrich approach doesn't happen. Rather than going directly to my colleague to resolve conflict, if I went to 5 other colleagues to talk to them about the colleague I'm having a problem with, that spreads a lot of gossip and negativity, and which breeds toxicity and lack of trust and so on.
Sure. So tell me, how does the process work? Is somebody contacting you and say, the house is on fire, the department's on fire, and we need a fireman, to use just an entirely different metaphor here, to help put this out. How does that process work? How do you step in?
Well, I do get that phone call often, and it's usually when people find out about me as a solution. They never knew I existed earlier, or they would have called earlier, or I get referred by employment lawyers or other HR professionals who know me and trust me to refer. And so what I do when I work with a group of people is I meet everybody one-on-one first and have a confidential interview to get each and every person's perspective. From there, I make choices on how to get the group together to create a safe space for healthy dialogue and healthy debate and or authentic conversation that helps everybody feel heard and understood.
I see. Do you find it happens more at the senior management level or the entry level, or where's, I hate to say it, sweet spot, but where's this most prevalent?
Well, I do a lot of work at the senior level because culture starts at the top. and I say heat rises. So sometimes I get asked to do a little, two-person mediation somewhere down the line, but in my investigating, don't like to use that word because I don't do workplace investigations. In fact, I don't think that they're useful in relationship repair at all. In my interviews with people, I often realize that the conflict is and needs to be dealt with at a higher level. Perhaps it's structural. And so I do often work with managers and leaders. However, I also work with entire teams. And when I am working with an entire team, I want the manager there as well.
So I would tend to think we spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about leadership and qualities of leaders. And it almost sounds to me what you might be describing is that this is a blind spot for leaders, that leaders don't always know either A, that there is conflict, or B, that they may be the ones causing the conflict. Would those be right?
Absolutely right. During COVID, our company did a survey to understand the effects of COVID on workplace conflict. We didn't know if conflict was going to go away, if everybody was just going to start getting along now that they're all displaced from the office. And what we found was that employees indicated they had more conflict than managers knew what was actually happening. So over time, we've really paid close attention to this culturally to help managers identify, do you have a problem that you didn't even know exists? And we have something really exciting coming down the pipe this year that is going to be an assessment that helps organizations answer that very question.
Very cool. I recall doing gap analysis, which is what I think you're describing here. So a gap analysis, we were doing it for safety, and we had asked workers one set of questions about safety, and then we essentially flipped those questions for the manager to answer them. And there was quite a bit of a gap for different departments by managers who thought things were safe and running, and the workers who were saying to themselves, no, that's not quite the way you think it is, pal.
And that's got a lot to do with psychological safety and people feeling safe enough to speak up and to really voice their opinions without feeling like they might get retaliated against or that they might not get invited to conversations that of influence.
One of the things I know that you do is you talk about these 5 biggest mistakes that leaders make. And maybe you can tell us what those 5 are, and we will work into a little bit some examples.
I already gave you the first one.
Okay,
it's avoidance.
All right, you heard it first. Avoidance. Don't avoid this.
It's the number one mistake that leaders make when conflict surfaces. As you mentioned, I call it the ostrich approach. Stick your head in the sand, pretend nothing's going on, or just not knowing what to do about it, so doing nothing. And I really want managers to hear this next statement. You don't need forgiveness for that. If your kid has a broken arm, you're a parent, you don't have to know how to fix the broken arm, but you need to reach out as soon as possible to have that injury repaired. And a conflict is basically a perception of an injurious situation that's happened, right? So don't delay. Act now and, reach out to somebody who you think can help you through this. The second biggest mistake that leaders make is exclusion, not including everyone in the right conversation. And this just isn't for managers. Like I already gave you the example earlier, where if I have a conflict with Trent, it's not going to be very helpful for me to go and tell 5 friends. I should really go to Trent. In fact, most conflict resolution policies say if you have conflict with somebody in your workplace, go direct. But
I have a question.
What?
Who's coming to me with conflict? Did I cause some problems to my listeners? Just curious here. You've used me a couple times in this example here. And,
well, you're the only one in the room. So
well, there's a dog down here, so maybe the dog's got conflict with me. I didn't give her a good enough milk bone.
She might bite your ankle. Most people don't go direct because they either, again, psychological safety, they have tried several times to no avail, or they just would rather have their manager deal with it. So when they go to their manager for their manager to deal with it, what the manager really should be doing is bringing both parties in to discuss it and becoming a mediator or a facilitator of an effective dialogue.
That sounds like a hard thing that managers get trained technically. they get trained in a lot of other, but I don't know how easily they get trained in bringing people together. So how does that happen? What would be one of the first steps? And then we'll come back to the other items in the mistakes list.
Well, I think that the manager has to, first of all, tell the person who came to them in the first place, not tell them, give them the opportunity to share their observations and feelings, and then restate what they've heard so that the person feels understood. That's always conflict resolution 101 is good listening. And then perhaps inviting them to a conversation with person B, and then reaching out to person B and saying, hey, person B, would you be willing to come in and discuss the XYZ circumstance with person A and myself at 2:00? As little preparation time, I think, as possible. Although some people do need some time, you want to have buy-in on both sides to have a conversation in the first place.
Sure. Thank you. And so you're picking back up. We're at the third biggest mistake they made.
Right. So the third biggest mistake is accommodating division. Oftentimes managers who have people that don't get along, what they'll do is they'll send them in their separate ways. Or an organization that has people that have a problem reporting to one manager, perhaps report out to a different manager. Sometimes I see dotted lines on the org chart. The organizational structure is critical to conflict resolution. So basically, accommodating division, I often tell the story about, if your two kids are fighting, you might send them to their own rooms, but you don't leave them there for 6 weeks. Right?
Well, I was only a child.
Or 6 months, or even 6 hours. You can accommodate division, send people home perhaps, or separate them for a while for a cooling off period, but you still need to go through the conversation to seek to find a resolution that works for everybody. And that's what mediation is. It's not a litigation process. It's about finding a solution that works for everybody.
Sure. So Penny, what's the fourth one?
Undermining authority. Let's say I have a problem with my manager and I go around my manager to the manager's manager.
Sure.
That's possible. That happens. We completely expect that in workplaces. What the manager's manager, let's call it the senior manager, could do in that case is, again, listen and then say, have you talked to your manager about this? And if not, perhaps go and tell the manager a little bit about this employee that's having some challenges. Give the manager the opportunity to deal with it and check back with the manager to, hold them accountable to having it dealt with.
What I hear you saying is that the senior manager has a responsibility to this process. First off, not to undermine their manager's ability to resolve it, because by them stepping in, they've eroded the authority that the manager has to resolve this. Did I hear that right?
And, Trent, I know you talk about accidental managers often, right? So I'm sure your audience knows what that means, but let's say a new manager is in a role. Undermining their authority happens often because the person who they're now reporting to isn't really giving them the confidence or the opportunity to make mistakes and coaching and guiding them. Instead, they start doing the managing for them, or, they'll take over a responsibility that really should be left to the manager, and then the people who report to the manager lose respect.
I follow. And so now the fifth one. Bring it home.
The fifth one is creating an emotional attachment to people that you manage. And I see this in so many ways. It's not just workplace love affairs that I'm talking about. It is perhaps friendships. For example, the accidental manager problem. Somebody gets promoted from within. Now they're managing their friends. That's hard to do, right?
Right. I mean, that's a big one. You went bowling with these folks for a while, and now you're in charge of them, and you're saying that there needs to be a little more separation.
Yes. Or you badmouthed your manager with these folks.
Oh, right. That's true.
And now you're managing them. And no, there is this degree of separation that you're talking about that becomes really important. We are very connected on social media. We see pictures. We have to be very aware of what we're posting, what pictures we're showing up in, and how other people perceive that.
So I'm trying to understand what the problem would be. If I have a group of 10 engineers that I'm part of, and I'm now made the leader, what happens if I don't somewhat disassociate a little bit with that crowd? What are some of the potential fallout?
I think that some of the potential fallout there is a lack of respect for you as an authority from your peers. Also, an awkwardness to hold people accountable and have difficult conversations. I often say it's hard to reprimand somebody that sits at your dinner table, right? And so it becomes uncomfortable to have a business relationship because there's so many friendships included, or there's so many elements of the friendship included.
Sure. Thanks. Our audience loves good war stories. And maybe you can tell one. And I know one of these, but I would love to hear you tell it. And it had to do with an engineer who had a problem for many years.
Okay. So I get a phone call from a global mining organization, and they just found out about me because one of their HR people encountered my business card. And the engineering, what was his title? Superintendent of engineering calls me up and says, hey, we need you. We have somebody who has been with us for a very long time, and he's going to be retiring, and the person that we've hoped that he would be grooming for the position is thinking of leaving because the two of them have a conflict, and we need one of them to stay. We need the younger one to stay. We've hoped that he's going to take over the leadership of the department. So I get doing what I do, meet each one-on-one first, and I find out something so interesting. I call the manager up and I say, hey, superintendent, did you know that this conflict has been going on for 15 years?
15 years, wow.
You know what he said to me, Jen? Yeah, I did.
So this guy knowing he's got a 15-year problem and waits until this date to say, that's avoidance. That's rule 1.
That's avoidance, but you know what? Remember I said he doesn't need forgiveness? I called him up, and as you know, I said, you know what? This has been going on for 15 years. He said, yes. I said, why didn't you do something sooner? He said, Penny, we're engineers, and that people stuff is messy, and we didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, and we just found out about you. And I called right away. So there's a lot there to unpack.
Absolutely.
Not everybody wants to dig in here and redo their sandcastles. But we had that problem resolved within a week.
What were some of the issues that those people were fighting about that made them so entrenched for 15 years that it required?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
So insignificant, I can't even remember. And I promise you, if it was significant, I would remember, because I can tell you some other war stories. But here's the thing. Like a rose has 2 little seeds in the center, or tiny little seeds in the center, and then all these petals, right? Well, conflict is very similar. It's the little seeds in the middle that are the original circumstances of perceived injury. Okay? And then the rest of the 15 years is just a bunch of petals. So, somebody came in and sat down too hard, or like somebody kicked somebody's lunch pail, when really all that happened was there was a nudge. It's just grows and gets uglier and uglier. So that's why we go back to, the avoidance piece as being the number one conflict resolver is don't wait. Just try to attempt it. And also, for all the listeners, I think one of the most important things is that communication is an art, not a science. It will never be perfect. So there's never a perfect time to have the perfect conversation, because there's no such thing as a perfect conversation. I think we need to allow each other to be human. We need to make space, like literally maybe a separate room. We don't want to be reprimanding out loud or calling people out loud. We need to make space for these delicate conversations, and we need to really be willing to hear the other person's point of view, the other person's perspective, and therefore there's no preparation needed. Sometimes people come into my interviews and they've got a stack of papers and folders, and I wish I had a blowtorch, because I would just burn it right then and there, because you know what, they need to let that go, right? But they've got all this evidence and all these, and so you can see that they've been compiling a case against this person for a very long time. And that doesn't really help in the grand scheme of speaking and listening to each other and co-creating something brand new. I call that drawing a line in the sand.
Okay. It sounds to me like married couples have some of these same issues. and they would go to marriage counselors to talk some of these items out. And I can imagine that a husband and a wife might come in with years and years and years of baggage that they want to finally get off their chest, and every indignation and every slight, and here's my opportunity to get even. But none of that works. Take it, right? That's what you're describing to me.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say that marriage counseling doesn't work, but
no, I mean having the baggage,
having all of this stacked up evidence against somebody. What I think when people come to me with that, all these things, like first there's this and then there's this and there's that, I say, okay, one conversation at a time. Pick the most recent thing and let's start there. Because it's the process that will help you move forward, not the going back and, clearing out all the things, because the process is really it's a lot about feelings, and it's a lot about listening and helping people feel understood, and then creating a new way forward. Some conversations or entire group sessions end in group hugs. You want to see handshakes? I'm serious.
I believe you.
Okay.
I've seen the pictures.
Okay. But, you one conversation at a time. And I think that if you've got more than one thing on your list to have a conversation about, you waited too long.
I see. Yeah. So I get it if you're speaking now from the manager perspective, or I should say you have been. So let's talk about the newer developing leader. So what can they do to help before they get to the point where somebody has to avoid something? How can they start and identify these issues earlier?
Well, I always start with listening. And that's just not listening to defend or respond, listening to really understand. So if somebody comes to the emerging leader and says, blah, blah, XYZ, the emerging leader could say, thank you for letting me know about blah, blah, XYZ. Now, that's harder than it sounds, because in that listening, we shouldn't be agreeing. So if somebody comes to the manager and says, Lucy is really loud and obnoxious, the manager shouldn't say, yes, Lucy is loud and obnoxious, but more that I understand that you think that Lucy is loud and obnoxious. See the difference?
I do, but Lucy is loud and obnoxious.
Possibly. It's hard to be neutral when you're taking sides, right?
Of course. You've come to my classes and done a listening technique and so maybe you can describe exactly what that is. We won't do it, but maybe you can describe what it is and what you're looking for in that outcome, because it's a great training tool for developing leaders.
What I do is I divide people up into partners. There's a partner A and a partner B, and I set them up for failure by saying, okay, partner A, you're going to talk to partner B about somebody who's had a great impact on your life. Partner B, your job is to listen. At 2 minutes, the timer's going to go off, and then we're going to reverse roles. Now, saying we're going to reverse roles is how I set them up for failure, because as they're listening for 2 minutes, they're thinking about who they're going to talk to when it's their turn. After the 2 minutes, we do a bit of a debrief, and I ask partner B's, were you listening 100%? They're like, oh yeah, me, yep, I was. And then I say, how many of you were thinking about, even once thought about who you were going to talk about? And all these hands go up, and I say, thank you for your honesty. Because the human mind is capable of hearing one thing and thinking something else at the same time. And so active listening is very, very energy consuming. It takes a lot of focus. And we don't have to be actively listening every minute of the day, but there are times when, for example, difficult conversations, when we're getting instructions or directions. Like, can you imagine, Trent, how much money corporate America could save if every time somebody was given an instruction, the person receiving the instruction got exactly what they were supposed to get as far as an understanding, and on that perfectly.
Sounds like we saved billions.
Billions. And it's not the listener's problem only, it's the sender's problem as much as it's the receiver's problem. So this back and forth, like, for example, if I'm a manager giving an employee a task and I say, give me a report on the life cycle of a widget, and the employee gives me back a report on the life cycle of a widget, and I say, no, this isn't what I wanted. I wanted how to extend the life cycle of a widget. Oh, well, that's a completely different ask, right? So when you give somebody a task to do and then you say, you get it? Right? Do you understand? Of course they're going to say yes, because they understand what they think they understand. And you said what you thought that you intended to say, but there's a lot of room for error in that. So I think a better thing to say is, can you tell me what you understand so that I make sure that I was really clear with my directions or instructions?
Right. Well, let me demonstrate my level of active listening. You told us earlier there's no such thing as the perfect conversation.
Yes.
This has been a perfect conversation.
Well, thank you.
I have just one last question for you, Penny.
Okay.
Who is your favorite fictional character?
My favorite fictional character is you.
What?
The version of you that puts down the toilet seat.
Well,
That's fictional.
I guess this would be a good segue to Penny Tremblay happens to be my lovely bride as well. Although, hearing that story, I don't know you're ever going to meet that fictional character.
Or if we're going to have to resolve some conflict tonight.
We may have to resolve some conflict tonight. Penny Tremblay, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for joining me in studio.
Thank you for finally.
Can I give you a kiss on stage?
Mwah.
Thank you. Resilient leaders, they face challenging currents, and it's tough navigating. But with one tack or another, we can get there together. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe. Go ahead, click that link, leave us a review or comment. You can find us for audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get them. I'm on LinkedIn and in my YouTube channel, of course. Friends, it was a great time today. Penny Tremblay and the Sandbox strategies. She's brilliant. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next time. Be well, folks.
Bye.